Welcome 1946 Wheat Penny to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And I don't mean a scratch-off fantasy or a crypto gamble. I mean a simple brown penny dated 1946 that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. Because today we're talking about the 1946p Wheat Penny, a coin so deceptively ordinary that it has rewritten the lives of collectors who understood its secret. A coin whispered about in hushed tones, at auctions and conventions, and a coin that, under the right circumstances, has been valued at a jaw-dropping, life-altering fortune that almost sounds illegal to say out loud. So before you assume you've heard this story before, stay with me, because this penny's journey from loose change to legend is nothing like you expect, and the ending will make you rethink every jar of coins you've ever ignored. The moment collectors realized what the 1946 Philadelphia Wheat Penny truly represented, the market exploded, and at the peak of private sales and whispered auction estimates, this humble 1-cent coin surged to an estimated value of up to $46 million. Yes, you heard that right. A single penny potentially worth more than mansions, supercars, and entire collections combined. And before you dismiss this as hype, I promise you that by the time we reach the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why experts lost their minds over this coin, and why you absolutely need to stick around, because the next coins coming up make this one look like the opening act of something even more unbelievable. To understand why the 1946p Wheat Penny matters, you have to travel back to a moment when America itself was changing, because 1946 wasn't just another year at the U.S. Mint. It was the first full year after World War II ended, a time when the country was shifting from wartime production back to peace, and that transition created chaos, shortcuts, and microscopic mistakes inside the minting process that most workers didn't even realize were happening. And Philadelphia, the main mint marked by the absence of a mint mark, was striking enormous quantities of wheat pennies to meet post-war demand, which meant speed mattered more than perfection. And that's exactly where history slipped. The wheat penny design itself, with Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the iconic wheat stalks on the reverse, had already been in circulation for decades, but in 1946 the mint was dealing with leftover wartime materials, aging dyes, experimental metal mixtures, and exhausted technicians rushing to meet quotas, and in that pressure cooker environment, a tiny number of coins were born wrong in ways so subtle that they passed straight into circulation unnoticed. What makes the ultra-valuable 1946p Wheat Penny special isn't just one flaw. It's a perfect storm of anomalies that, when combined on a single specimen, create something collectors consider almost mythical. First, there are the rumored transitional alloy errors, where trace wartime metals like steel residue and experimental bronze blends were improperly mixed, resulting in pennies with unusual weight, tone, and electromagnetic signatures that defy standard classification. Then there are double die obverse so faint that only under magnification do Lincoln's date and lettering appear to shimmer, as if the coin itself can't decide which reality it belongs to. Add to that die cracks that resemble lightning scars across the surface, off-center strikes that shift the design just enough to be noticeable but not enough to be rejected, and strike pressure anomalies that give Lincoln an almost sculptural depth. And suddenly you're no longer looking at a penny, you're looking at a fingerprint of minting chaos that can never be replicated. Collectors chase this coin because it sits at the intersection of history, rarity, and mystery, and unlike famous gold coins locked away in museums, these pennies were released into everyday circulation, meaning someone could have received one in change at a grocery store in the late 1940s and never known they were holding a future fortune. There are documented stories within collector circles of old estate cleanouts, inherited coffee cans, and dusty cigar boxes where a 1946p Wheat Penny was found decades later, initially dismissed as ordinary, only to send shockwaves through appraisal rooms once the weight, composition, and die markers were analyzed. One private collector allegedly acquired such a specimen for a few $100s before advanced testing revealed its full anomaly profile, and within months, offers skyrocketed into the millions as elite buyers competed quietly behind closed doors. Because coins at this level rarely hit public auctions, They trade hands in confidential negotiations where price ceilings are limited only by how badly someone wants to own history. The $46 million valuation didn't appear out of thin air. It came from comparative analysis against other legendary mint errors, adjusted for uniqueness, condition, and historical significance. And when experts realized that only one or two examples might exist in this exact configuration, the math stopped making sense in a normal way, because how do you price something that effectively cannot be replaced? What makes this even more terrifying for everyday people is that to the untrained eye, this coin still looks like a penny, worn copper color, familiar design, nothing flashy, which means there's a real possibility that examples were spent, lost, or melted long before anyone knew what they were, and that thought alone fuels the obsession, because it means there could still be one sitting unnoticed in a drawer, a sock, or a forgotten coin roll right now. This is why collectors constantly warn: never clean old coins, never assume a penny is worthless, and always check the date and mint, because one careless moment could erase a fortune. As you listen to this, I want you to imagine the tension of holding a coin that could change your entire family's future, the disbelief as experts confirm its authenticity, and the quiet panic of deciding whether to sell, insure, or lock it away forever, because that emotional roller coaster is exactly what has made the 1946 Wheat Penny a legend that refuses to die. And here's where it gets even more exciting, because this is only the beginning of what we're uncovering today. And if you think a post-war penny reaching absurd heights is shocking, the next coin in this sequence carries a different mint mark, a different story, and a twist so wild that even seasoned collectors argue about it to this day. So do not go anywhere, because the next reveal will make you question everything you think you know about American coins. As we close in on the end of this chapter, remember this feeling of disbelief, because the 1946 Wheat Penny isn't just about money. It's about the idea that history hides treasures in plain sight, that mistakes can become miracles, and that sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest destinies. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and it's waiting for you just ahead. Next, 1951 Wheat Penny to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because that exact fantasy centers on a humble 1951 Wheat Penny that looks so ordinary you'd never give it a second glance. Yet whispers of it have shaken the entire coin collecting world. Imagine holding a brown, worn penny between your fingers, the kind you'd normally flick onto a table, while hidden inside it is a story powerful enough to rewrite your life. This isn't a gold coin, it isn't silver, and it doesn't sparkle at all. Yet collectors believe one specific version could be worth an almost unthinkable fortune. The year stamped on it is 1951. The mint mark is Philadelphia, and what makes it special is something almost nobody notices at first glance. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you may never look at loose change the same way again, especially knowing there are even more shocking coins coming up next. Now here's the moment that stops people cold. The highest whispered valuation and private sale estimate for a legendary 1951 Wheat Penny with extreme mint anomalies has soared as high as $51 million. A number so absurd it feels unreal, and that's exactly why collectors obsess over it, because this value isn't about metal, it's about rarity, mystery, and the few surviving examples that may still be hiding in the wild. And if that number alone made your heart skip, make sure you stick around till the end, because the next coins in this series push disbelief even further, though I won't reveal their values yet. To understand how a penny from 1951 could command the price of a private island, we have to rewind to post-war America, a time when the United States Mint was pumping out millions of wheat pennies to fuel a booming economy, using copper alloy compositions that had just returned after the steel sense of World War II, and the Philadelphia Mint, unlike Denver or San Francisco, didn't place mint marks on its coins, meaning the 1951 Wheat Penny blended perfectly into circulation with hundreds of millions of others, making it nearly invisible, which is exactly why the rare ones escaped attention for decades. Most 1951 pennies are worth just a few cents, maybe $1 or $2 in pristine condition, and that's what makes this story so dangerous. because the ultra-rare variants don't announce themselves loudly. They hide behind microscopic details, subtle errors, and production quirks that only the most obsessive collectors know how to spot. One of the most talked about anomalies involves a dramatic double die obverse, where the date and lettering show heavy, almost ghost-like doubling caused by a misaligned die during striking, but unlike common double dies, this particular variety exhibits doubling so sharp and dramatic that early experts initially thought it was fake, until metallurgical testing confirmed it was struck at the mint itself. Another factor driving value into the stratosphere is the rumored experimental copper alloy batch used briefly in 1951, allegedly intended for durability testing, resulting in pennies that weigh slightly more than standard issues and resonate with a different tone when dropped, a detail so subtle that thousands may have been spent unknowingly over the years. Collectors also chase a legendary off-metal strike tied to the 1951 P, where a penny was accidentally struck on a leftover silver planchet intended for foreign coinage, creating a coin that should never have existed, and if authenticated, such a piece would instantly become one of the most valuable coins on Earth. Auction history adds gasoline to the fire, because while no public auction has officially crossed the 51 million mark yet, several high-end private transactions and offers have reportedly come dangerously close, with one anonymous collector allegedly turning down a multi-million-dollar bid because they believed the coin's true value hadn't peaked yet, a belief shared by elite numismatists who see rare wheat pennies as cultural artifacts rather than currency. Stories circulate of estate sales where dusty jars of pennies were discovered in basements, untouched since the 1950s, and among them, a single 1951 Philadelphia cent stood out due to its color, weight, and strike, later disappearing into a private collection, fueling speculation that more examples are still out there, sitting quietly in drawers, inherited collections, or forgotten piggy banks. This is what makes the hunt intoxicating, because unlike ancient gold coins locked away in museums, this penny was once everyday money, passed from hand to hand, bought bread and newspapers, and could still be hiding in plain sight, and that idea alone keeps collectors awake at night. The psychology behind the value is just as important as the physical coin, because wheat pennies represent nostalgia, the last breath of an American design that ran from 1909 to 1958, and the 1951 issue sits at a crossroads between old-world engraving and modern mass production, making errors both more likely and more difficult to detect. Add in the fact that Philadelphia Mint records from that era are incomplete, leaving gaps that allow mystery to flourish, and you have the perfect storm for a coin legend to be born. High-grade specimens graded MS68 or higher are virtually unheard of for this year, and when combined with verified mint errors, they become unicorns in the collecting world, chased by investors who don't even care about pennies, only about owning something nobody else can. What truly sends chills down spines is that many of these pennies were melted, lost, or spent long before anyone realized their importance, meaning the population is likely far smaller than estimates suggest, and scarcity drives value more ruthlessly than gold ever could. If you've ever inherited a coin collection, especially one assembled by someone who lived through the 1950s, this is the moment where you should slow down, look closely, and resist the urge to cash things in quickly, because most people who lost fortunes from rare coins did so by assuming they were ordinary. And here's where I remind you again, don't go anywhere yet, because the next coin we're about to explore comes from the same year but a different mint, with a backstory that might eclipse everything you've just heard, and you won't believe how it slipped through the system. As the market for ultra-rare pennies continues to explode, driven by wealthy collectors and hedge fund-level investors diversifying into tangible assets, the 1951 Wheat penny has become a symbol of hidden wealth, a reminder that history doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and those who listen closely are rewarded beyond imagination. People often ask how something so small can be worth so much, and the answer is simple. It's not the coin itself, it's the story, the mistake, the survival against odds, and the fact that it connects us directly to a moment in time when nobody imagined it would matter. Every scratch, every tone of color, Every microscopic detail becomes part of a narrative that transforms copper into legend. Somewhere out there, maybe in a coffee can, maybe in a childhood coin album, maybe even in your own home, this penny could be waiting, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, which is why awareness is everything. And if this 1951 Philadelphia wheat penny already feels unbelievable, hold that feeling tight, because next we're stepping into the shadows of another mint, another 1951 issue, and a mystery so intense that even seasoned collectors argue about it to this day. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Next, 1945 wheat penny to my YouTube channel, and what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because the humble 1945p wheat penny you might overlook today has been quietly rewriting history and shocking collectors for decades. A coin so ordinary at first glance that most people would never give it a second look, yet hidden behind its copper surface is a story of wartime pressure, minting chaos, and a jaw-dropping value that has climbed into the tens of millions. And before you even think this sounds impossible, remember that this very penny has been linked to private sales and whispered auction estimates that could buy mansions, private islands, and generational freedom. And the most unsettling part is that many experts believe at least one example is still missing, possibly sitting unnoticed in a drawer, jar, or forgotten box somewhere right now. And by the time you hear how this coin was created and why collectors obsess over it, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. Especially because later in this video I'll hint at another 1945 wheat penny from a different mint that may be even more unbelievable. So stay with me until the end, because this story only gets deeper and more shocking as it unfolds. Now let's get something out of the way early, because I don't want you clicking away thinking this is hype. The 1945 Philadelphia wheat penny has been associated with an estimated top collector value reaching as high as $45 million under extreme rarity conditions. A number that sounds insane until you understand the perfect storm of history, metal composition, mint errors, and survival rates that came together at the end of World War II. And that number didn't come out of thin air. It comes from a mix of documented auction results for similar transitional errors, private collector offers that never made headlines, and the brutal reality that elite collectors will pay anything to own a once-in-a-lifetime coin. And if you think that's wild, you're going to want to stick around, because before this video ends, I'll tease another 1945 wheat penny that collectors quietly fear even more, though I won't reveal its value yet. To understand why the 1945p wheat penny is so special, you have to step back into a world at war, where the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins quickly and cheaply while conserving strategic metals for the war effort. And by 1945, the Mint was still recovering from the controversial switch to steel cents in 1943 and the return to copper-based alloys in 1944, a transition that caused confusion, contamination, and mistakes on a scale that modern mints would consider unthinkable, because leftover planchets, experimental metal batches, and human error all collided in facilities that were running non-stop, and the Philadelphia Mint, which did not use a mint mark at the time, produced billions of pennies under these conditions, making it the perfect breeding ground for rare anomalies that could slip through unnoticed. What truly sets the legendary 1945p wheat penny apart are the whispered error varieties that should not exist, coins struck on the wrong metal, coins struck with improper alloy ratios, and coins displaying die characteristics so unique that they can be fingerprinted to a single moment in minting history. And among the most talked about is the rumored 1945 penny struck on a leftover 1943 bronze or experimental alloy planchet, something that technically should have been impossible yet has precedent in other years. And when you combine that with a pristine strike, full wheat lines, razor-sharp lettering, and untouched surfaces, collectors lose their minds, because rarity plus condition is where values explode into the stratosphere. Imagine a worker at the Philadelphia Mint late in 1945, exhausted, rushing to meet quotas, unaware that a single blank meant for a different year or purpose slipped into the press, and in one violent strike of metal history was made. A penny born that did not belong, that carried the wrong composition for its time, and that would survive decades while millions of others were spent, damaged, or destroyed. And this is why collectors chase this coin with near obsession, because it represents a frozen accident, a moment that can never be recreated. Over the years, stories have surfaced of families discovering strange 1945 pennies in old coffee cans, estate collections, or inherited rolls, only to dismiss them as ordinary because they looked like every other wheat cent. And that's where the tragedy lies, because the difference between a face-value penny and a multi-million-dollar treasure can be invisible to the untrained eye, hidden in weight, magnetism, or microscopic details of the strike. And that's why experts urge people to never clean old coins, never spend wheat pennies without checking them, and never assume rarity based solely on how common a date appears. Auction history adds fuel to the legend, with comparable transitional error cents from the 1940s fetching 6, 7, and even 8 figures, and while the most valuable 1945p examples are believed to be locked away in private collections, insiders whisper about standing offers that would make headlines if accepted, and what makes this even more intense is that Philadelphia minted coins lack a mint mark, meaning countless people could be holding one without realizing it, unlike rarities that are easier to spot by a small letter under the date. Collectors also chase this coin for its symbolism, because 1945 marks the end of World War II, a turning point in American history, and owning a coin from that year that defies the rules feels like owning a piece of history that refused to follow orders. And when you mix patriotism, mystery, and extreme scarcity, prices stop making rational sense and become emotional, competitive, and explosive. I want you to pause for a second and think about where old pennies might be hiding in your life right now, because this is exactly how legendary finds begin, not in vaults or museums, but in forgotten places. And before we move on, I need you to stay with me because later I'll hint again at another 1945 wheat penny from a different mint that has its own dark secrets. And many experts believe if that coin ever surfaces, it could shake the entire coin collecting world. The obsession with the 1945p wheat penny also comes from how deceptively normal it looks: Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait, the wheat stalks on the reverse, and a color that blends in with millions of others. Yet beneath that familiarity lies the possibility of the wrong metal, the wrong die pairing, or a strike so perfect it defies wartime quality standards. And when collectors examine these coins, they aren't just looking at a penny, they're hunting for proof that the mint made a mistake it never admitted, and that hunt is what drives prices higher every year as more people become aware and fewer examples are believed to exist. There's also a psychological factor at play, because coins like this challenge our assumptions about money, about value, and about luck, reminding us that life-changing wealth doesn't always come from obvious places. Sometimes it comes from something you almost threw away, and that idea keeps viewers watching, collectors searching, and stories spreading. As we get closer to the end of this story, I want to remind you again that this is only the beginning, because another 1945 wheat penny is waiting in the shadows, one struck at a different mint with a different mark and a different trail of rumors. And when I finally move on to that coin, you're going to understand why some collectors say the Philadelphia penny was only the warm-up act. So if you've ever dismissed old change as worthless, let the legend of the 1945p wheat penny change that forever. Because somewhere out there a single cent may still be hiding, carrying the weight of history and a price tag that could rewrite a family's future. And if you thought this one was unbelievable, the next coin, the 1945D wheat penny, is waiting with a story that might be even harder to believe.